Tom Nook. You probably know him as Animal Crossing's most iconic and longest-lasting main character. But do you really know him? Just who is he? Is he a meme-generating coin collector akin to Mr. Krabs? A power-hungry capitalist bent on assimilating control? Or a genuinely nice guy just trying to lend a hand? With a brand new Animal Crossing finally in our grasp, I decided to dig into every nook and cranny I could to uncover anything I could about Tom Nook's lore. And the truth surprised me. Let's talk about it. Most people's stance on Tom Nook seems to fall into one of two camps. People that believe Tom is good, and people who believe he's evil. The Tom is evil camp typically cites his obsession with money, his omnipresent ownership over various town facilities, and his sarcastic and borderline cruel tone when talking to the player. The Tom is good camp usually mentions that Tom offers you a place to live, a job, and a loan with no interest rate that can be paid back at any time without penalty. When we go back to the original Animal Crossing, the original Western Animal Crossing for GameCube, it's easy to understand where people would get a negative first impression of the guy. I even remember, back in the 2002 Nintendo Power Awards, Tom was nominated and mentioned in the Best New Villain category. From a gameplay perspective, Tom Nook is the closest thing to Animal Crossing's boss. Not like this kind of boss, even though that's also true, but this kind of boss. Despite there not being a true endgame, paying off Tom Nook's loans is the game's one main obstacle. Tom comes off as kind of a used car salesman type, making deals that sound better than they really are. For example, he mentions how he'll throw in a radio into your house for free just before uttering under his breath that he was never able to sell the thing in the first place. He chastises you when you don't have enough money to pay off your first house. When you're forced into a part-time job to begin making a dent in your loan, Nook constantly chastises you for being late, no matter how quickly you come back to him. He's also genuinely bossy. Snap to it! You don't need your mother to change you, do you? He barks as you shuffle into your mandatory work uniform. Show up to work without your uniform and he'll nearly have a heart attack.
And why aren't you in uniform?
He will eventually concede on the uniform in an attempt to stay hip with the kids. He's kind of the boomer of Animal Crossing. He's also a little bit of a prankster. If you don't pay back 1,000 bells a week, I'll send for the raccoon goons. Oh, JK, it was just a prank, bro, I didn't mean it. There is a certain charm about his quirky dialogue and his attempts to teach the player responsibility, but for many, this is a bad first impression that lasted a lifetime. It's interesting to note Tom Nook's animal type, the tanuki. Both his English name and Japanese names are a play on the word tanuki. While the tanuki is a very real raccoon dog animal that you can find in Japan, the tanuki plays a recurring role in Japanese folklore. The animal is usually written as a trickster, magically transforming itself to prank unsuspecting humans. The tanuki is already a big part of Nintendo's history, most notably in the Super Mario series. The tanuki suit, much like the magical tanuki of folklore, grants Mario the ability to transform. The tanuki has a close relationship to another animal in Japanese folklore, the kitsune, or fox. Both animals are described as magical, having the ability to transform, and having a history of deceiving humans. Some Japanese media has the two animals working together, although quite a lot of it has them actually fighting against each other. Kitsune are often painted as more magically powerful and pure evil than the tanuki, but in head-to-head battles and stories, they're often defeated by the more chaotic-leaning and prank-loving raccoon dogs. This same lore reflects in Animal Crossing. If Tom Nook is the lighthearted swindler tanuki, then Crazy Red is the evil trickster kitsune. Both animals run shops, but Red's black market, inflated prices, and counterfeit material certainly puts him on the more evil side of the spectrum. Now, I'm here today for a lot more than the Not As Evil as Crazy Red award. I want to figure Tom out. And while the original Animal Crossing is our first look at the man, it wasn't until the future games that we really started to get some real deep lore on the characters. In general, I found that the juicier the Animal Crossing info was, the harder it was to track down. Out of every single Animal Crossing title, no game reveals more about Tom Nook than the Nintendo DS's Wild World. Even though Wild World is one of the best-selling Animal Crossing titles of all time due to the massive success of the DS, I feel like it's the least revisited game. I think a big part of this is because it is without a doubt the ugliest Animal Crossing game. But if you squint hard enough at the blurs, Tom Nook's foggy past becomes clear. Wild World introduces a mechanic that many in the community call episodes. Multi-part soap opera-like stories that unfold over multiple different days at specific times of the year. Remember how I mentioned that these are obscure? They're stupid obscure. You'll notice that an episode has started when a character makes an exasperated sigh of depression before talking to them, and you then begin the story by asking them what's wrong in a special dialogue option. Each episode starts on a specific day. For example, the longest episode of the game, Mabel and Sable in January, starts on the second Wednesday of January and is 7 parts long. Part 2 of an episode is always 4 days after the first episode. Then each subsequent episode after 2 is always 3 days after the previous episode. I think the game gives you a 1-day buffer where you can catch an episode you missed 1 day after it initially triggers, but that is still a really well-hidden time commitment. Throughout these stories, we learn that Sable is the only character in Animal Crossing who has known Nook since childhood. Mabel was too young at the time to remember the interactions, but Sable and Tom grew up together, explored together, shared their dreams together, went on the roof and looked at the sky together. And I know what you're thinking. Is there real canon evidence of Sable and Tom Nook as a couple? And to that I say be very careful, because more than once, Sable describes Tom as the big brother she never had. Both Sable and Tom's lives were forever changed when Tom decided to follow his dreams and pursue a life making it big in the city. During this time, Sable and Mabel's parents passed away, forcing Sable to take over the shop and essentially raise her younger sister herself. Meanwhile, Tom's naive optimism was eaten alive in the cold, hard corporate world. He suffered hard working conditions, was dejected by the cruelty of the city, and was betrayed by someone for all the money he had. He returned home with his tail between his legs, feeling like a complete and utter failure, and falling into depression. During those bitter years, he damaged his relationship with Sable because he felt like such a failure that he pushed even his biggest supporters away. Tom alludes to having all his money being stolen in a get-rich-quick scheme from someone he used to trust. And in a completely unrelated story, in Wild World it seems like Crazy Red has a brand new get-rich-quick scheme. In this game, we get a brand new shady character, Lyle, who will frequently hound you to purchase one of his new insurance packages, which will never pay out as much money as they cost to buy. He even offers additional protection against buying fraudulent art. Lyle will mention Crazy Red, which will eventually determine what day Red shows up. It's more than implied that this dastardly duo of Lyle and Red work together to scam you with maximum bells, via a combination of fraudulent insurance and fraudulent art. It's a wild, wild world out there. But through these stories, one thing became extremely clear to me. Tom was without a doubt hardened by the city life, and his failures when he was younger are a huge contributing factor for why he pushes himself so hard for success back at home. But he is, without a doubt, a good person, in my opinion. Here's the facts. Sable mentions that during some of Tom's lowest moments in the city, he still took the time to write her frequently. And even though his job paid poorly and things were hard, he still found the time and the money to send her an incredibly nice pair of scissors for her birthday. Sable also reveals that she's the creator of his clothes, and even though he guards his feelings tightly, she's delighted to hear that he appreciates the work she's done for him. One of Tom Nook's statements during his time in the city caught my attention. Take the big city banks, for example. They will deny a young man a loan, though they know nothing of his character. This is probably what inspired Tom's now iconic zero-interest, zero-rush loans. He also shows true remorse at pushing Sable away, and mentions that despite his rock bottom, her wisdom still guides him. He also shows that he cares about Timmy and Tommy, who... we haven't talked about the little rascals yet, have we? Tom Nook clears up a pretty crucial misconception that I still hear today. Timmy and Tommy are not related to Tom by blood. They're not my children. We're not related at all. I like to think of them as my pupils and myself as their mentor. Tom wants to teach others good economic principles in order to help them from suffering the same pitfalls he did when growing up. That goes for Timmy, Tommy, and even you, the player. Ironically, despite all this talk of city folk in Wild World, the actual next Animal Crossing title, City Folk, spends a lot less time talking about the individual character backstories. There's only one set of soap opera-like episodes, but it focuses instead on Sable and Mabel's relationship with their estranged sister, LaBelle. A lot of similar parallels play out in this game though, especially with the theme of simple living versus pursuing your dreams in the corporate world. And speaking of the corporate world, it seems that Lyle got caught during his Wild World schemes at some point. He now works for the Happy Room Academy, but constantly complains about how much he hates his job and how he's struggling to enjoy his new clean lifestyle. In Animal Crossing New Leaf, we start to see some real significant shifts in power. I mean, you're the one with the power now. You're the mayor. A lot of people felt uncomfortable with the majority of all housing and shopping going through this one man, but in this game we see Tom taking a much larger step back from his old powerful capitalist ways. There are now a variety of different shops from a variety of different owners, including new store owners like Retail or Leaf's Gardening Store. Timmy and Tommy now run a shop on Main Street by themselves, reflecting well on Nook's time with them as a mentor. Nook now runs just the home side of things with his new company, still running his patented loans alongside a new employee. Lyle? Lyle seems considerably happier with this job than the one he had in City Folk. I like to think that this reflects well on Tom. Through Tom, Lyle found a way to make an honest living for himself, find his place in the world, and still show off his usual flair. In fact, funnily enough, Lyle is the main character that facilitates the episode-like lore of New Leaf. Every once in a while, Lyle will give you a special dialogue option that allows you to learn more about the various main NPCs. Through Lyle, we get more nods at Nook's history with the Able sisters, a nice bit about how Nook trained Timmy and Tommy about competition in the business world, and other similar tales. Remember how I mentioned that the better the Animal Crossing lore is, the harder it is to find? Well, my final stash of info comes from quite the unexpected place. Happy Home Designer and Amiibo cards. Huge props to Renee for collecting all of these, but by scanning them into Happy Home Designer, you can summon special NPCs and build houses for them. Once you finish building, you can chat with each NPC to get a few more lines of special dialogue from each of them. Here we get all kinds of juicy little tidbits, like this one from Sable, where she worries about Tom Nook getting lonely, and also mentions that he has a wonderful singing voice of all things. Nook himself has a lot to say, almost all of which fits with the Tom Nook that I learned about over the course of today's video. He says that 90% of his earnings go to charity, that charity work is rewarding, and that an orphanage a few towns over even has a wing named after him. He even straight up addresses the misconceptions that we're looking at in today's video. I've heard some folks believe I'm a ruthless and heartless businessman. This is not true. Perhaps I can see the value of having a boogeyman everyone can unite against, but paying for one's debts is important. If I must be villainized in my pursuit of teaching, then so be it. Tom Nook just might be the most misunderstood character of all in Animal Crossing. And over the last 20 years, he's come a really long way. In fact, literally, as I was finishing editing this video, I saw this exact same thing in a Verge article. Animal Crossing's creators think Tom Nook is misunderstood. They cite Tom as caring, and repeat that same thing that Happy Home Designer says, that Tom serves as someone who can help teach the player responsibility. As of today's video, New Horizons is officially out, the world couldn't be happier, and I can't wait to see how Tom Nook's story continues. To close today's video, I'll leave you guys with one final gem from Happy Home Designer. Have you ever worked with the fox? Yes, foxes are never to be trusted, I worked with the fox once in my life. Never again. Not after the incident. Quite a lot of it has them actually fighting against each other, and was betrayed by someone for all the money he had. On the more evil side of the spectrum. It was Red! Red was the one who cheated Tom in the city and broke his spirit. Tom Nook shouldn't be on this Nintendo Power villain list. It should be Red. He's the true villain. Oh wait, he is actually here. He's the winner of the most misunderstood character, the audacity!